Hi everybody, my name is Björn Callenfors. I represent a company called Access Communications. I'm here today to talk to you about really what we do in the smart city space. I want to thank Sensitive for inviting me to talk on this topic, and I'll hope you enjoy it. I really want to start off by highlighting one of the key obstacles when it comes to creating a proper smart city. I think collaboration, not just collaboration in terms of departments within a city, but also from a technology provider perspective, is one of the most important factors in when it comes to actually being successful in deploying something that is not just smart today, but smart tomorrow and actually brings you a value over time. I think this is very closely linked to open technology, so that the technology and the products that you actually deploy into a smart city space, for example, need to be built on open technology that enable you to actually integrate those into different types of systems. And it also gives you choice. It provides you from being locked into one potentially harmful relationship with one vendor. If you're unhappy with that technology, you might actually be stuck, and that is a very costly lesson for you to learn. However, it's something that can be avoided if you bet on the right horse. And in this scenario, in this context, that would be an open technology platform that allows you to actually have options when it comes to how the city is being developed over time, and how a particular sensor or particular technology is being used in the smart cities context. If you look at Access Communications, we provide network-based sensors. So from our point of view, I think we're mostly known for our network video products. However, we're now branching out into network audio, video analytics, network-based access control, and intercoms for that matter as well. I think there is a common denominator for all of the technology, and that is it's built on an open platform, which means that it can speak and it can play and it can exchange data with other parts on that same network, with other sensors, with other data mining softwares, for example. I think the video is a good example of something that can be utilized for many different purposes, not just only from a safety perspective where you want to have video evidence of a particular incident, but it can also detect and extract data on how many people are in a certain scene, for example, how many people are actually moving about in a certain area. Is there any particular a car, for example, that you know is stolen and that can be found in a city environment? If you read that license plate, that camera can read the license plate, but also provide image and provide that video data. So it can be combined to do many, many extremely interesting applications and for many different areas within a city. I want to take a step back really and focus on that open technology and really sort of dig deep down into what that means. For me, the foundation is built on two things: open standards and an accessible API. If you do not build your technology on open standards, it's very hard for that particular technology to talk and to actually collaborate with different types of applications that might not come from the same company. Technology is moving extremely fast, and we know that we haven't seen, what's going to come out tomorrow. But in order for your investment to make sense already today, you need to know that that particular investment will be able to connect into a new system that you might deploy tomorrow, for example. The available API is something you need to have a well-documented way of actually communicating with that particular device. It's easy for a lot of manufacturers today that claim that they are open because it's just a word, it's just a phrase. But you need to be able to walk the walk, because that API needs to be so well documented so it's easy for anyone outside of that particular company to actually make use of that particular sensor for their application, whatever it might be. If you look at the open standards, I think one extremely good example, if you look at the difference between a 12-hour clock and a 24-hour clock, I think we all know that it's quite hard to. You have to think twice about telling someone who uses a AM and PM clock if you yourself are using a 24-hour clock. You always have to think about, okay, is that PM or AM? Same thing goes for if you're changing a light bulb, for example. Imagine if you had to rely on one manufacturer in terms of what lamp you bought. So you couldn't change that into something else. You would be totally locked into that particular brand of light bulbs. You wouldn't be able to choose. So if you don't like the design of that particular lamps that were designed for that manufacturer of light bulbs, you have to replace everything and start again. That can be a very costly lesson to learn. I think this is something that we see in any technology nowadays, is that whatever you decide to invest in, it needs to be built on an open standard and have available APIs so that you know that you will be future-proofed in terms of that investment you made into those particular products, that can be used for whatever case you might see tomorrow. Because if there is something that we know, is that one size does not fit all. It's not going to be a one size fits all in terms of whatever you deploy is going to make sense in every environment. Some cities might be very interested in making that particular city more attractive to bicyclists, for example. That might not be the case for someone else who's trying to create something outside of this, who's looking to invest in safety equipment to make the city feel more safe rather than make it more attractive to bicyclists. But the same foundation needs to be applied here, and that foundation is really spelled open technology, because it's going to be the open technology that's going to allow you or not allow you to actually deploy new applications that help you achieve your goal, whatever that might be. If you look at also that the investment that we have made into our technology is, and if you look at the development of the processing power, we still adhere to Moore's law to some degree in terms of that we have more capabilities and more processing power on the edge in a camera, for example, that can do multiple things. Not just to provide a pretty picture, so to speak, but also it can count people. Also, it can detect and classify objects, for example. That data can be fed into multiple sources, multiple scenarios where you have, of course, safety, where you want video evidence of a particular incident, for example, but you might also want to use that to calculate, to get a feedback loop on how a certain area is actually being utilized. This is something that we see and invest quite a lot in how you can actually make use of that particular sensor. That particular video sensor should be able to be utilized by many different departments, not just from a safety perspective and looking at incidents retroactively, but also using the same camera, the same sensor to actually count cars, for example, in a certain area. Something that can be fed into the traffic department in terms of how you actually work long-term and decreasing traffic in a city, for example. How do you know that some of the other efforts that you're going through and some of the other challenges and some of the other tasks that other teams are working on are actually bearing fruit? How do you know that you are decreasing car traffic, for example? Why don't you use the same camera that you can use for traffic incidents for calculating this and feeding this into a data lake, for example, where you have all the data on how people are moving about in their cars in a city environment? And why not use the power available to you on the edge, on the actual camera, to do this, so that you don't have to put in a lot of extremely expensive infrastructure equipment and a lot of different servers, and maybe you don't have the cloud connection, for example, to send images into the cloud for analysis. Why not use the power available to you on the edge to do all of those things for you instead? And I think I mentioned that one-to-many or one-to-one. I think today we look at technology, and also from a vendor perspective and a developer of technology, we look at technology from a very one-to-one type of relationship. A very siloed approach where technology is deployed to do one thing. However, if you look at the capabilities of sensors today, and especially video sensors, that can be done by multiple departments can make use of the same sensor. Of course, what you need is that layer of intelligence and logic to make sense of it. And this is a good example to introduce where sensitive come into this, because we just provide the sensor. So we just collect a lot of data, but that data needs to be presented in a way. It needs to be cross-referenced, perhaps, with a lot of data from different other sensors. So you need a very stable layer that allows you to actually move away from your silos, that make use of the open technologies and presents it and makes it into something that you can actually act upon. And I think this is something that we, as a technology provider, need to do better, and that is provide better use cases and better examples of how you can actually go from a one-to-one relationship in terms of technology into a one-to-many relationship. If you look at a really good example of something that can be done by a camera, perhaps even cameras that are actually being deployed from a safety perspective in a city surveillance context, for example. Cameras and video data you can extract information on objects in the image. How many people are actually in a city square, for example? Is that good? Is it bad? That can be from a safety perspective. That data can be fed into a department when you actually are planning the city. That information is gold, because you will get a real-time feedback loop on how the city is actually being used. But at the same time, you're also leveraging that same investment into actually using that for safety perspectives. If you look at parking, is another really, really good example. There are a multitude of extremely competent technologies where you look at, say, for example, shopping malls that are using automatic license plate recognition in order for you to have a more smooth entrance and exit from a shopping mall. Potentially that can be used in a city, for example. I think every one of us I personally don't want to drive in a city, really based on it's hard to find parking. Maybe this could be used for a multitude for purposes. Well, you use it to detect and make available where there are free parking spaces. The actual LPR itself could be used for an automatic billing of my car. I'm standing parked here for a certain amount of time and I'm driving away. Of course, that same technology can be leveraged for safety. If something happens, if there is a break-in, for example, in my car, that is something that data, that video evidence can be used to actually, solve that particular crime, for example. If you have the opposite of that spectrum, if I didn't find a parking spot, there might be a high risk that I actually parked somewhere where I'm not allowed to park. Instead of having a manual checkup on where people park, this can be done automatically. And at the same time, that same investment can be leveraged by someone from a safety perspective, so that you actually make sure that if something happens, you have evidence. Best case scenario would be for a real-time action based on if something happens, but it can also be used for automatic finding of a vehicle that are parked in a spot where they should not park. That same thing could be used for if you're running a red light, for example. If you're running a red light, if you have a camera that captures your LPR, or if captures your license plate when you run a red light, gives you an automatic fine, of course people would not be as prone to making sure that they have access, that they drive when it's yellow, for example. I think this is a big issue everywhere. I think it's something that we all experience that drives, but that is a big issue. But if you knew that you would be automatically fined, I think you would be prevented from actually trying to make that yellow light before it turns to red. Potentially that's something that you can use that camera for. You still have that video evidence that is being logged, that is being backed up, so you have that possibility to actually check on if there was an incident, what happened, and who did it. I think in some cases, in some examples, if you have your vehicle stolen even, that is something that can be solved by that too. And having the cameras and actually being assisted by the cameras in order to actually capture that vehicle. It would be leveraging the same technology investment in my previous example, but it's covering a multitude of different types of use cases. So you're using that open technology to make sure that you're actually capturing different types of scenarios and making that city a more livable space, a city that is more attractive. I think, of course, from our perspective, what you also need, and I really want to stress this, is that you need that platform that enables you to pull all of these things together. And once again, that's where Sensitive comes in, with that logic to be able to provide you with a platform that allows you to make use of the open technology, that allows you to actually step away from that very siloed approach and into a more collaborative space where you actually get real-time data, make use of the technology, and leveraging the investment, and also being able to add on different services over time, as it doesn't stop here. And I think we all know that technology will be developed, and we will see more and more intelligent sensors in the future, but you need that layer that allows you to actually make sense of all of that data that you capture. So I really want to finish off by really, well, a summarization of what I've been talking about. And I think that open technology perspective is, I think, one of the most important ones in order to actually step away from that very siloed approach. Open technology really, it allows you to have a choice in terms of who you work with. If you're not happy with a particular vendor, you can switch. You're not going to be locked in. It's going to be you who, as a user, who has the control. It's not going to be agreements. It's not going to be someone that forces you due to proprietary technology. If you have that open platform to start with, you can also make sure that you enable yourself to actually add on services and innovations that will come that we today do not know exists, but you have the foundation to stand upon. And together with Sensitive, it allows you to make use of that and create real value of the particular sensors that you deploy today, but also will be most likely deploying tomorrow. So I'm just going to leave you with these words. So keep calm, choose open, everything is going to be all right. I want to thank you all. My name is Björn Callenfors. I hope you have enjoyed this, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.